All right, so as I've said previously, such that the left will ever become ascendant again politically as any kind of legislative force and more than that, cultural force, really, people like Joe Rogan are going to have to be, at least in some capacity and in certain ways, part of a coalition. I think the idea that you can build a big enough of a coalition to do the big right things that have to be done, not merely to repair the damage that comes from this administration, but to put forward the kind of legislative agenda and then the kind of effort that goes into it, and then having enough appeal to reach out to people beyond what would traditionally be considered the audience of the left. If you're going to do that, and if that's going to be done the right way, folks like Joe Rogan, again, in certain ways, are going to have to fit into that. I just don't see how you can really look at a future and think, oh, yeah, we can build a big enough of a coalition to do big and important things, Medicare for all, for example, without people who are at least in some ways sympathetic to ideas from the left. I mean, this idea that, like, oh, Joe Rogan of the left was the Joe Rogan of the left. It's not true. The guy has had right-wing leanings for some time. I spoke about this, I should say, with Kyle Kalinske. But in all seriousness, I think this idea of a future where we can do big, important, really life-changing things that have to be done to secure the future and prosperity of the people of this country, people like Joe Rogan are going to fit into that. And I know that might make some folks on the left uncomfortable because they want this moment to be one where he gets comeuppance, but the reality is he fits into that. Now, as it pertains to this Jeffrey Epstein story, this is a bigger thing than just that. And what I mean by that is we've been talking about comedian podcasts and the podcast circuit more broadly. This is actually where my background in MMA really is quite informative, where I watched UFC President Dana White circumvent any version of what would have been adversarial media, which is something he used to lean into, by the way. It's not I don't think he can do, or rather, it's not something I think he would get swallowed by. But if you're him and you can go on podcasts with big audiences and you never have to answer for labor rights, if you never have to answer for fighter pay, if you never have to answer for monopoly concerns, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? You can get all the same benefits of the size of the audience with none of the downsides of having to answer for your labor practices. That's obviously what you're going to do. This is exactly what Trump and J.D. Vance and many other folks on the right have realized, that you can go on these comedian podcasts, you can go on Andrew Schultz, you can go on Theo Von, you can go on Joe Rogan. Those aren't the only three. Those tend to be three of the more prominent ones. But you can go on there. They've got a big audience. And yes, you might be able to lean into portions of the conversation that you wouldn't get if you went on, I don't know, CBS News, 60 Minutes or something like that. But the real benefit is not just the audience size, is that they're not going to press you at all. You can just say whatever you want. And the thing that I need Joe to wrap his head around here is, it's one thing if you want to invite on some kind of academic, which he does time to time, who's got some kind of work that they want to present, and they're basically going to do it in what we would largely consider to be a good faith way. They might be right, they might be wrong, but they're really not out there they don't have an ulterior motive other than to present what their work is or flex their knowledge, right? You can have, I think, a more relaxed conversation in those circumstances. That's actually where I think the Joe Rogan format works the best, is when he has someone on who knows a lot, who has interesting things to say, who's basically operating in good faith, and then they just let it rock. That actually works, and I think you can keep doing that for a very long time if he chooses to do so. Lastly, I would say, yes, I have been on the Joe Rogan Experience, not for anything other than MMA. I did the MMA portion of whatever that show is. This was October of 2020. He was very friendly to me, and I appreciate being on. I think some of the things I discussed about the UFC's monopoly has probably prevented me from going back on there, but I can't say that with any degree of certainty. It's just a hunch that I have. Nevertheless, here we are back at these Epstein files. I'm going to show you this clip because it's actually astounding. It is astounding what he is saying. I don't know who he's talking to. This is from a recent episode, and they're now discussing what is obviously happening, which is the unraveling of this Epstein story and the containment that the Trump administration is trying to put around it. Trump has gone after his own viewers, and there's not viewers, I should say, but supporters. He has called up Dinesh D'Souza and Charlie Kirk and told them, basically to get in line, and they're begging everyone to move on, which is another issue altogether. Now, Rogan apparently has not got that message. Credit to him. I appreciate that. But he's going to say something here that it blows my mind that he still thinks this is the right way to go. And again, a future of successful left governance includes people like him in terms of the coalition that could support it. But we got to get him on board with what the actual program is here.
Videotape, and all of a sudden they don't. You know, you got the director of the FBI on this show saying there's no if there was, nothing you're looking for is on those tapes. Like, what? Why did they say there was thousands of hours of tapes of people doing horrible shit? Why?
Right. Obviously. Clearly the story doesn't make sense. They agitated around the story for years and years and years. We already know that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein had a strong relationship, that he had flown on his plane upwards of 7 times, that there's audio of Jeffrey Epstein saying he was Donald Trump's best friend for 10 years, to say nothing of how much the MAGA media coalition and the ecosystem agitated around this, to say nothing of the fact that, you know, Kash Patel, who's now head of the FBI, and Dan Bongino, former podcaster, or I guess soon to be podcaster, depending on your perspective, he agitated around this. This has been a key fixture and fascination of the MAGA-world. And as we previously pointed out, it's only one of two things. One, they're engaged in a cover-up, this administration is, or two, they agitated around things that they knew to be false because they knew that they could use conspiracism in a political world where conspiracism is the prevailing epistemology. But okay, that's not really the most important part. Here it comes.
Why did they say that?
Right.
Didn't Pam Bondi say that?
What, are you talking about Epstein or Diddy?
Yeah, Epstein.
Yeah, she said it literally, I think, a week before you had the FBI director sitting here telling you there was nothing, right?
She said something about that there was like thousands of hours of tapes of people doing horrible crimes.
There is. And didn't the FBI dude say that there was nothing?
Kash Patel said there's nothing you're looking for. Oh, okay. Okay. I mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to push back.
Right. No,
I mean,
of course. I understand.
Obviously,
I understand.
Oh my God. Oh my God. What am I going to do? Push back? Oh my fucking God, Joe. Oh my God. Oh my God. Joe, that's exactly what you have to do. This isn't some professor at Swarthmore who's interested in archaeology, who you can kind of have on and let him have say, in, again, a good faith way. These are political figures, and to the extent that even left-wing figures, left-wing political figures go on your show in the future, grilling them, not only do I support, I demand you not give them free rein. I demand it. But more to the point, what am I going to do? Push back? Holy shit, Joe. If you are going to have either political candidates, politicians, or key political figures, including those who are in charge of clandestine services, come on your podcast, your number one obligation is to be skeptical. Your number one obligation is to not accept their word at face value, because sure as fuck you would not do that if it was the Obama or Biden administration. They're sending out key political figures or lackeys or some combination of the two to your podcast, and you have them on, and you're just going to take their fucking word for it? The director of the FBI, a former podcaster who specifically, forget even the hypocrisy that he specifically agitated around this issue, even if he hadn't, do you think he's going to go on your podcast and, like a Boy Scout and Scout's Honor, just tell the truth? Your job is to press him. That's the fucking gig. Your job is to lean into his inconsistencies or parts of the story that don't make sense. Now, obviously, at the time in which Kash Patel came on, much of this hadn't even happened yet, where Trump is just trying to bury the story, so there's less to deal with there. But that was the early attempts at the story. Remember all those binders that like libs of TikTok and DC Drano had, where they're like, "Oh, we got this." That was clearly an attempt by the Trump administration to like throw a little bit out there to make them think that this was something that they could latch onto, in hopes that like that would be enough and that people would basically forget about it, even though it was kind of introduced as like a first phase. But that was kind of the hope. The hope was that like, oh, this will be red meat enough for them to accept, and then you can move on. Except people didn't, right? Because there wasn't enough there, and there hasn't been enough transparency. And so now it's only heightened suspicion. The point I'm trying to make is these are the operatives you are inviting on your fucking show. What am I going to do? Push back? Yes! That's the fucking job. And if you're not up to that job, stop having these fucking people on your show. Have James Hetfield from Metallica. They had a whole conversation about beekeeping. It was great. It was great. Have on Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a little tiresome, but you get the point. He's not going to go out there and tell you mRNA vaccines are going to give you AIDS or some dumb shit. Have people on who you can reliably trust, not to be always right, but to be operating in good faith. Political figures coming on your show, left or right, and in particular the motherfucking right, do not deserve the presumption of innocence around this. Stop being gullible. One more time. Are these political figures picking these comedians' podcasts because they have big audiences, including around certain forms of the electorate that are usually hard to bring out to the voting booth? Yes. But the real cherry on top, the thing that seals the deal, is that they're gonna fucking walk all over you. And they do. They're using your podcast to make all of this shit palatable to audiences, or at least the attempt to. And you're like, what am I going to do? Push back, motherfucker? Yes! Or decide you're not up to the task of this and stop inviting them on. Make them work for it. You have a vast audience. You have command of them. You're just going to feed them bullshit because this guy's powerful and you, want to be nice? And by the way, folks are like, well, what if he had pushed back against you when you were on? Great, I was fucking ready. Believe me, I did my homework. I came into that conversation I had with Joe again. It was just about MMA, but there were some monopoly topics that came up. I was ready. I was ready to go with citations. I was ready to go. Please push me. Oh my God. Oh my God.
He's saying what he has to say.
Right.
Mystery surrounds the Jeffrey Epstein files after Bondi claims tens of thousands of videos. Tens of thousands. Jesus Christ.
I'll tell you what.
Chill. Oh my God. Was reviewing tens of thousands of videos, the wealthy financier with children or child porn. The comment made to reporters of the White House days after a similar remark to a stranger with a hidden camera raised the stakes for President Donald Trump's administration to prove it has in its possession previously unseen compelling documents. Or just bomb Iran, and everybody forgets
Just
about
bomb Iran, yeah.
Everybody forgets about it.
In my heart of hearts, I absolutely do not believe Joe Rogan is a bad person. I know he's got some ideas that I absolutely really despise. I know many people really believe that. But I don't think he's some kind of Stephen Miller who, is uniquely awful. But I don't think he's some kind of Stephen Miller type who is, some sociopath who's wishing harm upon the world in some kind of racial hierarchical order. I don't know that he really believes in that. I think he sees these ICE raids and it bothers him. I think he sees this inconsistency around what Trump has said and done, and it really bothers him. I think he sees that people are suffering, and on some level it does bother him. There is a part of that as well. But dude, if you're not going to correct the orientation of what you're doing, and I don't expect him to be omnicompetent, but if you're not going to hold political actors on your show to some kind of an account, it's just letting them have free reign. It's not exactly like a Tokyo Rose situation, but it kind of serves similar-ish ends in a way. Just letting malignant political forces in office and out of it drive the national conversation by outright lying and then just saying, well, what am I supposed to do about it? Either hold them to account or stop fucking having them on.